you will remove that flag immediately. Or I'll have the city seize your property for violating federal patriotic display codes. I never thought I'd be threatened on my own front porch at 9:17 a.m. on a Saturday morning, coffee still warm in my hand, staring at a woman who claimed my American flag violated community aesthetic standards. But there she was, Melissa Hartfield, president of Heritage Oaks, HOA, for exactly 9 weeks, pointing at the flag my grandfather raised on this property every morning for 38 years before he died serving this country. I'm James Mitchell, retired Marine Corps gunnery sergeant and third-generation flagpole keeper in Austin, Texas. And this is the story of how one power-drunk HOA president decided that my family's 62-year tradition of flying the American flag was a visual disruption that violated her carefully curated neighborhood vision. Melissa had moved into Heritage Oaks 4 months ago and apparently believed that patriotic displays were militaristic propaganda that lowered property values in her upscale community. She had no idea what she'd just started. She had no idea that attacking a Marine's flag meant attacking someone who'd spent 23 years defending the right to fly it. And she definitely had no idea that her precious HOA had been operating illegally for 3 years, collecting over $300,000 in fraudulent dues while representing an organization that didn't legally exist. But standing there on my porch, blocking my Saturday morning routine with demands that I dishonor my grandfather's memory, Melissa Hartfield believed she was untouchable. She was about to learn otherwise. The flag isn't just fabric to me, it's blood, sacrifice, and legacy woven into every thread. My grandfather, Thomas Mitchell, raised it on this property in 1962 when he bought 3 acres of Texas hill country and built the house where I grew up. Every morning at sunrise, every evening at sunset, he performed the ritual with military precision learned during 2 tours in Korea. The routine was sacred, unbreakable, a daily recommitment to the values he defended with his life. I remember being 5 years old, standing beside him as he taught me the proper way to raise colors. "Jimmy," he'd said, in that gravelly voice that commanded respect without demanding it. "This flag represents every man and woman who gave everything for the freedom you're going to take for granted someday. Don't you ever let anyone tell you it's just decoration." When Grandpa Thomas died in 1985, heart attack while raising morning colors, the flag cord still in his hand, my father Michael continued the tradition without missing a single day, through Desert Storm, through the years when arthritis made his hand shake, through chemotherapy that left him too weak to stand without support. Dad raised and lowered that flag with the same reverence his father had shown. When cancer took Dad in 2019, the responsibility became mine, carried forward with the same dedication that had marked 62 years of unbroken service to something bigger than any individual. The property sits on a corner lot of what used to be genuinely rural Austin before the development boom of the 2010s transformed surrounding farmland into Heritage Oaks, one of those instant luxury communities that appeared seemingly overnight. 60 identical McMansions, each one a monument to architectural conformity. Governed by an HOA so aggressive, they fined residents $200 for having grass that was half an inch too tall. My 3 acres remained untouched by the development, grandfathered in with property rights that predated Heritage Oaks by 50 years. The main house was modest, a 1960s ranch style that my grandfather built himself, but it sat on land that had appreciated to nearly $1 million as Austin exploded into a tech hub. The flagpole stood 25 feet tall at the property's highest point, visible from the main road and from every house in Heritage Oaks. Old Glory flew there every day. Exactly as military protocol demanded, raised briskly at sunrise, lowered ceremoniously at sunset, illuminated at night, never touching the ground. For 3 years after Heritage Oaks appeared on my eastern boundary, we coexisted peacefully. The HOA residents were mostly tech workers and professionals who appreciated having open space next door rather than another development. Several were veterans themselves, who'd stop their morning jogs to salute as I raised colors. Then Melissa Hartfield bought the corner mansion directly across from my property, and my peaceful existence ended. My first real encounter with Melissa should have been a massive red warning flag wrapped in neon lights. It was early October, a crisp Saturday morning, and I was outside at 6:47 a.m. for morning colors. The routine was automatic after years of practice. Unlock the flagpole box. Remove the carefully folded flag. Attach it to the cord with practiced precision. Raise it briskly while standing at attention. I was halfway through raising colors when I heard the sharp click of expensive heels on pavement. I looked up to see a woman in designer workout clothes, the kind that cost more than my monthly utilities, marching across the street with the aggressive confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her entire privileged life. She was maybe 42, gym-toned with the kind of artificial perfection that comes from personal trainers and cosmetic procedures. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail. Her makeup was flawless, despite the early hour. And she carried her phone like a weapon. Screen glowing. Already recording my morning routine like she was documenting evidence at a crime scene. I finished raising the flag, took 3 steps back, came to attention, and rendered a proper salute, the same salute I'd given thousands of times in 23 years of service. The ritual was sacred, not to be interrupted by neighborhood drama. Only after completing the ceremony did I turn to address this stranger who was filming me on my own property. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral despite the irritation building in my chest. She didn't introduce herself, didn't ask my name, didn't apologize for the intrusion or the early hour. Just launched straight into her complaint like she was reading from a prepared script. "Are you aware that flagpoles over 15 feet require HOA Architectural Committee approval before installation?" Her voice carried that particular tone of condescension that suggested she was explaining basic concepts to someone too stupid to understand them. I took a breath, reminding myself that civilians often didn't understand military culture or property rights. "Ma'am, I'm James Mitchell. This property isn't part of Heritage Oaks HOA. The flagpole has been here since 1962, long before your development existed." She removed her sunglasses with theatrical precision, revealing eyes that assessed me like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. "I'm Melissa Hartfield, Heritage Oaks HOA president. That flagpole is clearly visible from our community and violates Section 12.3 of our architectural and aesthetic guidelines regarding visual disruptions. Your guidelines don't apply to property outside your jurisdiction," I explained calmly, though my Marine training was screaming at the disrespect being shown to the flag and the property it flew over. Her jaw tightened in that way people's faces do when they're not used to being contradicted. "Mr. Mitchell, the Heritage Oaks covenants are very clear about maintaining community aesthetic standards. Visual disruptions that affect property values are HOA business, regardless of technical property lines. This isn't about technicalities. This is about property rights and the law." She stepped closer, invading my space. in a way that suggested she was used to intimidating people through proximity and aggressive body language. We'll see about that. I'm calling an emergency architectural committee meeting to address this violation. You'll be hearing from our attorney. She turned and walked away, heels stabbing the pavement with each step, already typing furiously on her phone before she'd even crossed back to her property. I stood there for a moment, watching her retreat, wondering if I should have handled that differently. Then I looked up at the flag, my grandfather's flag, my father's flag, my flag, and knew there was no other way to handle someone demanding I dishonor their memory. I went inside, poured fresh coffee, and tried to continue my Saturday routine. But in the back of my mind, I knew that confrontation was just the beginning of something larger. That first encounter was just reconnaissance. What came next was a systematic campaign designed to make my life miserable until I surrendered. The complaint started Monday morning. Not one or two casual concerns, but 8 formal violations filed with the City of Austin within 3 days, all claiming my flagpole violated various height restrictions, safety codes, and zoning regulations. According to Melissa's detailed reports, each one multiple pages long with photographs and measurements, my 25-foot flagpole was a dangerous structure that posed imminent collapse risks during storms. She claimed it violated residential height restrictions, created visual pollution, blocked sight lines for traffic, and presented lightning strike hazards that endangered the entire neighborhood. The accusations were creative. I'll give her that. Completely false. But creative. The city inspector who came out was Dan Rodriguez, a weathered guy in his 50s wearing a Veterans of Foreign Wars cap that immediately told me everything I needed to know about how this inspection would go. "Sergeant Mitchell," he asked, extending his hand with the firm grip of someone who understood military courtesy. "Retired. But yeah, you can call me James. Dan Rodriguez. Marines, 23 years. U-Army, 12 years. Iraq and Afghanistan." He glanced up at the flagpole, taking in the flag flying crisp and clean in the morning breeze. "Let me guess, HOA president doesn't like your colors. She thinks it's a visual disruption." Dan shook his head with the kind of disgust reserved for people who disrespect what they've never had to defend. "Had a guy try to make me take down my flag last year. Claimed it was too big for residential display. Told him if he had a problem with the American flag, he could take it up with the Constitution." He spent the next hour meticulously inspecting the flagpole, checking the installation, reviewing my permits, measuring everything against current city codes. When he finished, he sat in his truck filling out paperwork with the careful attention of someone documenting something important. "James, your flagpole is grandfathered under 1962 installation permits, which are still valid and properly filed with the county. The structure is professionally maintained, meets all modern safety standards, and is actually over-engineered compared to what code requires." He showed me his report. I'm documenting this inspection as finding 0 violations and noting that the complaints appear to be harassment rather than legitimate safety concerns. Will that stop her from filing more? Probably not. But it'll be on record that the city has investigated and dismissed her claims. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Between you and me, this woman has filed 17 complaints against various residents in the past 2 months. Grass height violations, paint color issues, mailbox placement disputes. She's got a pattern of using city resources to harass people who don't comply with her vision of neighborhood perfection. Why hasn't anyone stopped her HOA president? People are afraid to challenge her because she controls the board and can fine anyone who speaks up. My advice: document everything. Save every email, every letter, every interaction, because this type doesn't stop until someone forces them to stop. After Dan left, I spent the afternoon researching, discovering something that would prove crucial later. The City of Austin's complaint database was public record, searchable online. I pulled up Melissa's filing history and found exactly what Dan had described: dozens of complaints against residents who'd crossed her, each one detailed and aggressive, most dismissed as unfounded. But the complaints weren't just about aesthetics. They revealed a pattern of using official channels to punish anyone who challenged her authority. A neighbor who'd questioned her at an HOA meeting suddenly faced complaints about tree overgrowth. A resident who'd voted against her election found himself reported for parking violations. Another homeowner who'd requested financial records was hit with noise complaints. Melissa Hartfield wasn't just an entitled HOA president. She was someone who weaponized bureaucracy against anyone who threatened her control. But city complaints were just the opening move. What came next showed the true scope of her campaign. Wednesday morning brought a certified letter that made my blood pressure spike. Not from the HOA that would have been expected, but from the Federal Aviation Administration. Dear Mr. Mitchell, we have received a report that a structure at your property 25-foot flagpole at 4721 Oakmont Drive may pose a hazard to aircraft operating in the Austin-Bergstrom International Airport Approach Corridor. Federal aviation regulations require all structures over 200 feet AGL above ground level or those in designated approach zones to be registered and potentially marked with aviation safety. Lighting. An inspector will contact you within 14 days to assess the reported structure and determine if FAA regulations apply. Failure to comply with FAA safety requirements may result in civil penalties up to $10,000 per day. I read it 3 times, each reading making me angrier. My property was 15 miles from Austin-Bergstrom Airport. My 25-foot flagpole was nowhere near any flight path, approach corridor, or restricted airspace. The FAA threshold for structure registration was 200 feet. My pole was less than 13% of that height. Melissa had filed a false report with a federal agency, wasting their resources and attempting to intimidate me with threats of federal penalties that couldn't possibly apply. I called the FAA office listed in the letter and got a patient investigator named Sarah Kim who clearly dealt with nonsense complaints regularly. Mr. Mitchell, I'll be honest with you, this complaint doesn't make sense based on your location and the structure height you've described. But we're required to follow up on every report. Can you email me your property coordinates and the flagpole specifications? I sent everything within minutes. Sarah called back an hour later. Yeah, this is what I thought. Your property is outside any restricted airspace, and a 25-foot flagpole wouldn't require registration even if you were closer to the airport. I'm closing this complaint as unfounded. And Mr. Mitchell, whoever filed this wasted federal resources on a false report, if they do it again, we'll investigate them for filing false aviation hazards. Can I get that in writing? Absolutely. I'll send you official documentation that your structure poses no aviation hazard and requires no FAA action. But Melissa wasn't done with federal agencies. That same week, she filed complaints with the EPA, claiming my property had drainage issues that violated water management regulations. OSHA alleging that my flagpole installation violated workplace safety standards, despite this being a private residence with no employees. and the FCC claiming the flagpole created radio frequency interference with neighborhood wireless systems. Each complaint triggered an investigation. Each investigation found nothing, but each one cost me hours of time explaining basic facts to federal investigators who were being pulled away from legitimate work to chase down one woman's vendetta against a flag she didn't like. The emotional toll was starting to show. I'd served 3 tours in Iraq, survived firefights and IED attacks, came home with a Purple Heart and PTSD that I'd mostly managed through therapy and the daily routine of flag ceremony. The structure and discipline of raising and lowering colors had been part of my healing process. Now, that routine was being attacked by someone who'd never served, never sacrificed, never understood what the flag represented to people who'd bled for it. I started having trouble sleeping. The 3 a.m. wake-ups that had mostly faded were coming back, triggered by stress instead of combat memories. During the day, I found myself checking my mailbox multiple times, dreading whatever new complaint or investigation notice might be waiting. My neighbor Tom Chen noticed the change. He stopped by one afternoon while I was lowering evening colors, waiting respectfully until the ceremony was complete before approaching. James, I need to tell you something. Tom was a software engineer, maybe 35, who'd moved to Heritage Oaks 2 years ago. Melissa's been going around the neighborhood telling people you're dangerous. She's saying you're unstable, that the flag obsession is a sign of mental illness, that you've threatened her. I felt my jaw tighten. I've never threatened anyone. I know that Sarah and I both know that, but she's convincing people who don't know you. She's telling them you're a volatile veteran with anger issues, that the flag thing is aggressive nationalism, that you're making the neighborhood unsafe. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to know what you're up against. Melissa isn't just trying to take down your flag. She's trying to destroy your reputation so that when she finally makes her move, the whole neighborhood will support her instead of you. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and faced a hard truth. This fight was affecting my mental health in ways I hadn't experienced since leaving active duty. The stress was bringing back symptoms I'd worked years to overcome. I was starting to feel the same hypervigilance, the same constant alertness for threats, the same difficulty trusting that I'd felt in combat zones. For the first time since Melissa started her campaign, I wondered if maybe I should just take the flag down, move somewhere quieter, avoid the battle altogether. Then I walked outside and looked at the flagpole, illuminated in the darkness, and heard my grandfather's voice as clearly as if he were standing beside me. Don't you ever let anyone tell you it's just decoration. I went back inside and called my attorney, Bob. I need to fight this, whatever it takes. Good. Robert Hayes replied, because I just found something that changes everything. Robert Hayes had been practicing property law in Austin for 30 years, and his voice over the phone carried the excitement of someone who just uncovered the kind of evidence that wins cases. James, I've been digging into Heritage Oaks HOA records, and there's something very wrong with their incorporation status. What do you mean? Every HOA in Texas has to maintain active registration with the Secretary of State. It's not optional, it's a legal requirement to operate as a nonprofit corporation. I pulled Heritage Oaks records, and their registration lapsed on August 15th, 2021. They never renewed it. My heart started beating faster. What does that mean legally? It means Heritage Oaks HOA ceased to be a legitimate legal entity 3 years ago. They've been operating as an unincorporated entity, collecting dues, issuing fines, and enforcing covenants without any legal authority to do so. How is that possible? Either nobody noticed, or someone noticed and didn't care. But James? This is huge. Every fine they've issued since 2021 is fraudulent. Every rule they've enforced has no legal standing. Every dollar they've collected in dues was taken under false pretenses. I processed this information. Understanding the implications, Melissa's been collecting dues for an organization that doesn't exist. Exactly. And if she knows about this, if she's been deliberately operating a fraudulent entity while representing it as legitimate, that's criminal fraud. Can we prove she knew? That's what we need to find out. As HOA president, she should have known about incorporation requirements, but whether she knew or was just incompetent, the effect is the same. Everything she's done has zero legal validity, including her demands about my flag, especially her demands about your flag. Even if Heritage Oaks were properly incorporated, Texas and federal law both prohibit HOA restrictions on American flag displays, but an organization that doesn't legally exist definitely can't restrict anything. That night, I couldn't sleep, but for different reasons than before. Instead of stress and PTSD symptoms keeping me awake, it was the anticipation of what came next. For weeks, I'd been playing defense, responding to complaints, proving my innocence, fighting off investigation after investigation. Now I had the ammunition to go on offense. Thursday morning brought Melissa's most aggressive move yet, and the confrontation that would change everything. I was in my garage working on my truck when I heard multiple vehicles pulling up. Through the window, I saw Melissa arrive in her Mercedes, followed by a moving truck and two workers wearing Heritage Oaks contractor badges. I stepped outside to find the workers approaching my flagpole with cutting equipment and what looked like concrete saw. "Hold on," I said firmly, walking toward them with the command voice that 23 years in the Marines had perfected. "What exactly are you planning to do?" the lead worker, a guy in his 20s who looked deeply uncomfortable with whatever he'd been hired to do, stopped and consulted his paperwork. "Sir, we have authorization from the Heritage Oaks HOA to remove this flagpole as an emergency safety hazard." On whose authority Melissa stepped forward with her ever-present folder, now bulging with what appeared to be official documentation. She was dressed for battle in business attire, expensive suit, heels, hair and makeup perfect. Despite the early hour, this wasn't a casual visit. This was a planned operation. Heritage Oaks emergency safety protocols authorize immediate removal of dangerous structures that pose imminent risk to community residents. Her voice carried practiced authority, like she was reading from official guidelines rather than making threats. "Your flagpole has been designated a Category 1 hazard requiring emergency remediation." That's completely false. This flagpole has passed every city inspection. It poses no safety risk to anyone. She opened her folder with a flourish, revealing documents that looked impressively official, stamped, sealed, covered in legal language that would intimidate most people. Emergency powers under our governing documents allow the HOA to take immediate action when community safety is at risk. We've documented multiple violations, received engineering assessments of structural instability, and obtained proper authorization for emergency removal. "Show me the engineering assessment." She pulled out a report that looked legitimate at first glance: professional letterhead, technical language, measurements and calculations, but something about it felt wrong. I scanned the document quickly. and my engineering training from the Marines immediately spotted problems. The load calculations didn't match the flagpole's actual specifications. The wind stress analysis used incorrect formulas. The entire report looked like it had been generated by someone with just enough knowledge to sound convincing, but not enough to be accurate. "This is fake," I said flatly. "How dare you? The structural engineering formulas are wrong. The wind load calculations don't match Austin weather data. And this company I pointed to, the letterhead, doesn't exist. I can verify that right now." I pulled out my phone and searched for Pinnacle Structural Engineering Austin. No results. No website. No business registration. No professional certifications. The workers exchanged nervous glances. The lead guy stepped back from the flagpole. "Ma'am, if there's a dispute about authorization." "There's no dispute," Melissa insisted, but her voice had lost some of its earlier conviction. "I have emergency authority under HOA bylaws from an HOA that doesn't legally exist," I said calmly. Letting that bomb drop right in front of the workers and the small crowd of neighbors who'd started gathering to watch this confrontation, Melissa's face went pale. "That's a lie. We're fully incorporated and legally authorized. Texas Secretary of State records are public information. Heritage Oaks HOA's registration expired August 15th, 2021, and was never renewed. You've been operating an unincorporated entity for 3 years." Tom Chen had joined the growing crowd of neighbors, and he pulled out his phone to verify this in real time. "Holy shit!" He's right. The state database shows Heritage Oaks HOA as inactive registration lapsed. The workers immediately backed away from the flagpole. "Lady, we're not touching anything until this is sorted out legally. If you lied about having authority, we're not going to be part of destroying someone's property." I didn't lie. "The incorporation must be an administrative error. For 3 years, I asked, during which you've been collecting monthly dues from every resident." Another neighbor, a woman named Sarah Morrison, spoke up from the crowd. "Wait, if the HOA isn't legally registered, where has our money been going? I've been paying $150 every month for 2 years. Tom did quick math on his phone. 60 homes. $150 monthly. 3 years. That's $324,000. The crowd went silent as that number sank in. "Where's the money?" "Melissa," Tom asked, his voice carrying the edge of someone who just realized they might have been defrauded. Melissa looked cornered, desperate, her carefully constructed authority crumbling in real time. "All HOA funds are properly accounted for in our financial records, records we've never been allowed to see," Sarah interrupted. "Every time anyone asks for financial statements, you say they're being audited or the treasurer is preparing them or there's some excuse why we can't access our own community's finances." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, making sure everyone, especially Melissa, could hear every word. "I need police at 4721 Oakmont Drive. Someone is attempting to vandalize my property with fraudulent authorization and may be operating a financial fraud scheme." The workers were already loading their equipment back into the truck, wanting nothing to do with what was clearly becoming a criminal investigation rather than a legitimate job. Melissa's final desperate play was to try intimidation through volume and righteous anger. "You're interfering with legitimate HOA business. I have emergency authority and legal backing from an organization that doesn't exist." I replied calmly, "You're a private citizen committing fraud. Melissa, not an HOA president exercising authority." Two Austin Police Department patrol cars arrived within 5 minutes, lights flashing. Officers Brooks and Martinez stepped out, clearly prepared for some kind of property dispute based on what dispatch had told them. Officer Brooks was in his 40s, with the weathered look of someone who'd seen every kind of neighborhood drama Austin could produce. Officer Martinez was younger, maybe late 20s, but carried himself with the careful attention of a cop who'd learned not to make assumptions about domestic calls. "Who made the 911 call?" Brooks asked. "I did." "Officer James Mitchell." I extended my hand, noting the way he assessed me military bearing. Calm demeanor. No signs of aggression or instability. "This woman is attempting to remove my property based on fraudulent authority claims." Melissa launched immediately into her prepared narrative, not giving me a chance to explain. "Officers, I'm the HOA president of Heritage Oaks. Mr. Mitchell's flagpole violates multiple community safety standards, and emergency protocols authorize its removal. He's been hostile and uncooperative throughout the inspection process. And now, he's interfering with legitimate safety remediation." I handed Officer Brooks the documentation Bob Hayes had prepared property deed showing my land was never part of Heritage Oaks. City inspection reports confirming the flagpole met all safety standards. And most importantly, the Texas Secretary of State records showing Heritage Oaks HOA's lapsed registration. Brooks examined everything carefully, his expression shifting from neutral to skeptical as he compared Melissa's impressive-looking documents with my verified county and state records. "Ma'am, where did you obtain this engineering report?" He was holding up the fake structural assessment Melissa had tried to use as justification. "From our HOA's consulting engineer." "What's the engineer's name and license number?" It's in the report." Brooks flipped through the pages. "There's a company name, but no individual engineer's name. No PE license number. No professional seal. In Texas, structural engineering reports require a licensed professional engineer's seal to be valid." "Well, our board approved it." "What board, ma'am?" "According to Texas state records, Heritage Oaks HOA hasn't been a registered entity since 2021. Brooks's tone had shifted from neutral to suspicious. "Have you been representing yourself as president of an organization that doesn't legally exist?" Officer Martinez had been examining the flagpole during this exchange, and he noticed the small memorial plaque at its base that I'd installed when Dad died. "In memory of Thomas Mitchell, U.S. Army, Korea, and Michael Mitchell, U.S. Navy. Desert Storm, honor, service, sacrifice. Sir." Martinez addressed me directly. "Is this a veterans memorial?" "Yes." "Officer, my grandfather installed this flagpole in 1962. My father maintained it until 2019. I'm continuing the family tradition." Martinez looked at Melissa with barely disguised disgust. "Ma'am, you're trying to remove a veterans memorial flagpole based on fake engineering reports and claiming authority from an organization that doesn't legally exist." The crowd of neighbors had grown to nearly 20 people, all of them hearing this exchange. All of them processing the implications of what was being revealed. "This is ridiculous." Melissa's voice was rising, her careful composure breaking under pressure. "I have authority. I have board approval. I have community support. Show me the board meeting minutes approving this action," Brooks said calmly. Melissa fumbled through her folder, pulling out what looked like official meeting minutes, but when Brooks examined them, his skepticism deepened. "Ma'am, These minutes show a board vote on August 20th, 2024, but they're signed by 5 board members whose signatures look identical. Tom Chen stepped forward from the crowd. Because they're forged, I'm supposedly on the board according to HOA records. But I never signed anything and I never voted to remove anyone's flagpole. Sarah Morrison added, I'm listed as treasurer. I never signed those minutes either. I didn't even know this meeting happened. Brooks's expression hardened as the scope of deception became clear. Ma'am, you're going to need to come to the station for questioning. We're looking at potential fraud, forgery, and operating a criminal enterprise under the guise of an HOA. This is insane. I'm protecting the community by fabricating documents, by forging board signatures, by operating an unregistered organization while collecting hundreds of thousands of dollars in dues. Brooks was no longer asking questions. He was laying out evidence. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. As he began reading Miranda rights, the crowd erupted in angry questions about where their money had gone and how long Melissa had been lying. Officer Martinez called for additional units to help control the scene and take statements from the growing number of residents who'd realized they might be fraud victims. I stood beside my flagpole, watching Melissa being placed in handcuffs, and felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief that the harassment was ending. Satisfaction that justice was being served. But also sadness that it had come to this, that someone's ego and control issues had led to criminal fraud, affecting 60 families. As the patrol car took Melissa away, Tom Chen approached me with an expression I couldn't quite read. James, I owe you an apology. When she first started complaining about your flag, I thought maybe you were being stubborn about HOA rules. I didn't realize she was running a criminal operation. You couldn't have known, but I should have questioned her more. We all should have. He looked at the crowd of neighbors, many of whom were now pulling up the state records on their phones, seeing for themselves that their HOA was a legal fiction. She's been stealing from us for 3 years, and we just kept paying because we trusted she had authority. Sarah Morrison joined us, her voice shaking with anger. I've paid $3,600 in dues over 2 years. Where did that money go? What was it used for? That question would soon be answered. And the answer would be even worse than anyone imagined. The investigation that followed moved faster than I expected, driven by the Austin Police Department's fraud division and the sheer number of victims who came forward with evidence of Melissa's systematic deception. Within a week, forensic accountants had traced the money trail, and what they found was staggering in its scope and audacity. Melissa had been depositing all HOA dues into personal bank accounts since 2021, not into accounts that might be confused for legitimate HOA funds, into accounts with her name only, at banks where the HOA had no relationship. The $324,000 in dues had been spent on $87,000 in personal home improvements to her Heritage Oaks mansion, $43,000 in luxury car payments, $31,000 in designer clothes and accessories, $28,000 in spa treatments and cosmetic procedures, $52,000 in family vacations, $38,000 in high-end restaurant meals, and $45,000 in consulting fees paid to companies that didn't exist, shell corporations Melissa had created to funnel money to herself. She'd also been issuing fines to residents for manufactured violations, collecting those fines into the same personal accounts, and pocketing the money. The total theft exceeded $380,000 when fines were included. But the financial fraud was just the beginning of what investigators uncovered. Detective Sarah Chen from the Fraud Division called me 6 days after Melissa's arrest. Mr. Mitchell, we need to talk about the documents she presented to you. The fake engineering reports. The fraudulent HOA authorizations. The forged board signatures. She didn't just make those up on the spot. She's been creating fake documents for years. How many? We've found over 50 fabricated documents in her files. Fake board meeting minutes. Falsified financial statements. Fraudulent compliance reports. Even fake letters from attorneys who never represented the HOA. She created an entire paper trail of legitimacy for an organization that didn't exist. Why go to that much trouble? Control? Power? Money? She found a group of people who trusted her. And she built an elaborate con to exploit that trust. The fake documents made everything look legitimate, so nobody questioned her authority. The criminal charges filed against Melissa were extensive theft by deception, fraud with multiple counts, forgery with multiple counts, operating an illegal financial enterprise, filing false reports with government agencies, and harassment of a protected veteran under federal veterans' rights laws. Total potential sentence 15 to 25 years in federal and state prison. But the consequences reached far beyond criminal court. The Heritage Oaks residents filed a class action lawsuit seeking full restitution of all dues paid, plus damages for emotional distress and loss of home value, Melissa's assets, her house, her car, her savings. Her retirement accounts were all frozen. Pending judgment, her husband filed for divorce within a week of her arrest, claiming he'd had no knowledge of the fraud. The professional consequences were immediate and devastating as her real estate brokerage terminated her license the day after her arrest. But perhaps the most significant consequence came from Texas State Representative Maria Santos, whose district included Heritage Oaks. She called me 10 days after Melissa's arrest, proposing legislation that would require annual verification of HOA registration status, mandatory financial audits for HOAs over a certain size, and criminal penalties for operating unregistered HOAs while collecting dues, with specific protections for veterans' memorial displays. 3 months later, the Texas legislature passed what became known as the HOA Accountability and Veterans Memorial Protection Act, or informally, Mitchell's Law. The trial took 8 months to reach resolution. Melissa pleaded guilty to reduced charges and received 12 years in federal prison, full restitution of all stolen funds, and permanent prohibition from serving in any HOA leadership position. The sentencing hearing was brief but emotional. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it brief. Your Honor, Melissa Hartfield tried to take down a flag that represents 62 years of family service and sacrifice. She did it using fake authority, fake documents, and fake concern for community safety. But what she really threatened was bigger than one flag. She threatened the idea that in America, property rights matter, that fraud has consequences, and that veterans' memorials deserve respect. The judge's response was pointed. Ms. Hartfield, you exploited your neighbor's trust to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars. You fabricated documents to claim authority you didn't have, and you targeted a veterans memorial based on personal preference rather than legitimate concern. This court finds your actions reprehensible and deserving of significant punishment. 12 years. Full restitution. The end of Melissa Hartfield's fraud. 6 months after Melissa went to prison, I received a letter from her daughter Emma, who was 19. She wrote, apologizing for her mother's actions and thanking me for standing up for what was right. I wrote back telling her she wasn't responsible for her mother's choices and offered to be a character reference if she needed one today, 3 years after Melissa's arrest. The flag still flies on my grandfather's pole. Every morning at sunrise, every evening at sunset, I perform the ritual with the same precision Thomas Mitchell taught me 70 years ago. The Heritage Oaks community transformed under new leadership. The property has been officially designated as a Veterans Memorial Site by the Texas Historical Commission. The neighboring lot was converted into a small Veterans Memorial Park with benches and a second flagpole flying the POW MIA flag. Mitchell's Law has already been used dozens of times across Texas, giving veterans and homeowners legal tools to fight HOA fraud and harassment. On the anniversary of Melissa's arrest, Heritage Oaks held a small ceremony at the Veterans Memorial Park. A young boy approached me with his father and asked why the flag was so important to me. I knelt down to his level. "See that flag up there? Every morning, I raise it to honor everyone who served our country. My grandfather, my father, me, and thousands of others who believed freedom was worth fighting for. It's not just fabric, it's a promise that we'll never forget their service." The boy saluted, clumsy but earnest, and I returned it properly. That evening, as I lowered colors for the day, I thought about everything that had happened since Melissa first demanded I remove this flag. All because one woman couldn't tolerate the sight of an American flag flying over a veterans memorial. Melissa Hartfield is currently serving year 3 of her 12-year sentence. She's filed multiple appeals, all denied, and the flag that still flies on my grandfather's pole, protected now by law, honored by community, respected by a state that learned hard lessons about HOA accountability that flag says otherwise. I'm James Mitchell. I served this country for 23 years, defending the freedom that flag represents, and I'll keep raising it every morning, lowering it every evening, honoring the memory of everyone who served, for as long as I'm able, because some things are worth fighting for. Semper Fi.